When I was in college, I went on a last-minute one-night camping trip with 5 of my friends. A guy named Greg, who I've known since grade school, drove, and we all crammed into his old 4Runner with our stuff. There was a 2-mile hike to get into where we wanted to camp, so we tried to pack light by only bringing 3 tents. That way we could double up with 2 people per tent. One of my other friends, Justin, threw in an unopened 6-pack of beer, and this was a 6-pack of cans that were in a box. He did that so we could each have 1 beer that night, then toss the box in the fire and smash the cans for easy carrying on the way out. By the time we drove out there, hiked in and got to the campsite, it was just starting to get dark, so the tents went up first. Then we all gathered around the fire pit on these 2 big logs that were in an L shape and ate whatever we had brought for dinner. Somewhere during that time, Justin walked around and handed each one of us a beer, which plays an important part in what happened later, but I didn't know it yet. After that, we just hung out and talked. About an hour after it had gotten dark, Greg's girlfriend Brooke loudly said something about a plane being on fire and was pointing up above us. Everyone looked at the same time, and I personally remember how weird it was seeing this for the first time. There was some kind of dark aircraft literally sitting still above where we were camped, and it had a long red light going across the underside of it. This is such a hard thing to explain, but that light on the bottom would get brighter and dimmer, and every time it got brighter, it would let out this large glowing half circle of red light around itself. It was like a burst, and we could see it stay in the air, then it would fade out after a couple of seconds. We watched one burst come out right after another for a minute straight, and none of us had a clue what it was. I don't know why Brooke thought it was a plane on fire because it didn't look anything like that. Greg thought it was a helicopter shooting out flares or something along those lines, but it was dead quiet, which makes me think that couldn't be right. Then it abruptly stopped and went pitch dark, so I don't know if it flew away or what happened. It was definitely one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, but it was short-lived, and after it happened, we just kind of went back to what we'd been doing. About half an hour after that, we were sitting around the fire and I started to feel nauseous and a little lightheaded. When it first hit me, I thought it might be dehydration, so I started drinking water, but then on top of it, I was feeling this mental fog. That's probably the best term I can come up with for how it felt. It was really weird though, because I had only eaten a small sandwich that night and had 1 beer. I couldn't think of anything else that would have made me sick all of a sudden. I happened to be sitting next to one of my best friends, Natalie, and I let her know I didn't feel good. Then I got up off the log because the smoke was making my nausea worse. I remember walking around to the opposite side of the fire and looking back at everyone sitting there. Justin was by himself on the log to my left, and Natalie, Greg, and Brooke were on the other log to my right. As I was watching this scene of my friends in kind of a daze, I got this disturbing feeling that something was wrong. I was still trying not to throw up at the time, but the mental fog was making the whole situation look like a dream. Then this distant question came into my mind as I was looking at the group. Why are there only 4 people? When I had this thought, I mentally did a left to right head count. Justin, Natalie, Greg, and Brooke. Then there was me, so 5 in total. In that moment, I was extremely confused and almost disoriented. I could have sworn we had another person with us, and it was making me feel like I was either on something or losing my mind. I was second guessing myself too, like, what are you talking about? Of course there were only 5 of us, but at the same time, it was like I knew that was wrong. I was trying to go back through the day in my head because it just felt like we were missing someone, and I could not think of who it was. I know this sounds like a crazy person talking, and let me tell you, I felt like one. I just had this bizarre gut feeling there was someone else with us for the entire trip, and now they were gone. I don't know how to explain it, and I couldn't even attach a face to it. Right in the middle of this mental crisis, my nausea got really bad and I had to run into the trees to throw up. Weirdly, after I did that, I almost immediately felt better physically and mentally. I have no idea why it helped so much. I just know that afterward I was like 99% back to normal. After that happened, I came back to the group and sat next to Natalie. She had seen me get sick, so she had her hand on my back to make sure I was okay. I didn't say anything at first, then I finally asked her if anyone else had come up there with us. I don't think she understood what I meant by that, so I looked right at her and bluntly said, I thought there were 6 of us. What I will never forget is that instead of immediately telling me no, she actually had to look around the campsite before answering. It wasn't even on purpose, it was totally automatic, like she was checking without realizing she was doing it. When she looked back at me, all she said was, "Wait a second." I could tell immediately that she felt it too. Then she asked out loud to the whole group if someone had left, and everyone stopped talking to look around. It actually scares me when I picture that moment because nobody laughed or acted like it was a dumb question. Everybody seemed genuinely unsure for a second. That set off a group conversation so ridiculous we couldn't help but laugh about it, and it went on for the rest of the night. Justin and Brooke were totally sure there had only ever been 5 of us, and they thought it was insane to even question that. Natalie, Greg, and I didn't feel that way. We thought something was off, even though none of us knew exactly what it was. One very interesting part of the conversation came when I brought up the 6-pack because I specifically remembered Justin saying each person would have one. He says he never said that and was sure someone drank 2 beers, but no one claimed that 6th can. The tents also came up, and I remembered our discussion about 2 people in each tent. That part seemed to make so much sense to me, and I could have sworn I had it in my mind that no one would have to sleep alone. Justin chimed in again and said he brought his own tent and was always going to be by himself. Every explanation seemed to almost fit but never totally added up. That's why the whole thing was so weird. There wasn't a specific person we were missing, it just felt like we were short, and there were these little discrepancies that partially backed that up. Obviously, there were only 5 of us sitting there around the fire, but I couldn't stop feeling like we'd had one more with us that day. And I know Natalie and Greg at least partly felt the same way. When we finally stopped talking about it and went to bed, I slept perfectly fine for some reason. Natalie and I shared a tent, and I not only fell asleep the second I laid down, but I slept like a baby. In the morning, everything felt mostly back to normal and everyone seemed to be in a good mood. We didn't do much more than hang out in the woods for a while, then we hiked back to the car and drove home. The problem is, this never went away for me. Later that same year, Greg flipped his opinion completely. If it ever came up, he would side with Brooke and say he never really felt like there were 6 of us. I also don't think it hit Natalie as hard as it did me because she stays pretty quiet, but at least she hasn't changed her mind. She doesn't know what happened, but she knows something did, and she's told me in private that after I brought it up that night, she felt it too. This is pretty far out there, I know, and I hope I've written it well enough to understand. I think about that trip a lot and wonder all kinds of crazy things, like maybe we really are in a simulation and we experienced a glitch. I do have another thought that bothers me the most though, and I don't know why I always go back to this. I wonder if we had a close encounter and whatever we saw above our camp that night was them. Then I think if that's true, they either did something to us and that's what made me sick, or even worse, they actually took one of us and we don't remember. In my opinion, when Natalie asked if someone had left the group, it should have been an easy and immediate no, or it shouldn't have been a question at all. But the fact that everyone had to stop and think about it for a second proves they all felt it to some degree, and that would never be the case normally. On the surface, I will say we had a very strange thing happen to us in the woods and leave it at that. In my gut though, I could swear there was a 6th person with us right up to the point where we saw that thing in the sky. Then somehow we were down to 5, like one of us had just been erased, including the memories everyone else had of them. I can't explain it, and I don't know why it affected me the most. I still can't picture a face or come up with a name, but I have these little pieces of someone else being with us, and it's enough to make me think that I could be right. Ever since I was a young lad, I pondered the existence of extraterrestrials. For me, growing up in the northeast of England and no older than 10, the existence of aliens and UFOs was as mysterious as the existence of God himself. I would even think of other things like vampires, werewolves, and the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie as we Brits like to call her, but it all fascinated me. As a young blonde-haired boy, the only aliens I knew of were from the movies I watched, like War of the Worlds and Independence Day. These movies made me imagine the possibility of alien life and what the consequences of that could be. In the year 2012, though, when I was barely into secondary school, I had the first of two very real experiences that were nothing like what I would have imagined. I had been growing up in the East Riding of Yorkshire for the past 7 years in the average-sized but oddly named port town of Goole. This town was of no particular interest except perhaps for its landmarks, two rather tall water towers humorously named the Salt and Pepper Pots. Goole was sparsely surrounded by patches of farmland and large crop fields, really a perfect setting for a UFO story like the crop circle stories I knew of in the United States. However, my first experience didn't happen in a field on the outskirts of town, but right in the town itself, and more precisely about 100 meters outside my bedroom window. Through my teens, I was always a bad sleeper. It was either impossible for me to fall asleep, or I was waking up hours before morning. This happened to be the latter, where I woke up to my silent, pitch-black bedroom while everyone else in the house was asleep. I didn't have an alarm clock or a phone at the time, so I'm not sure what time it was. I lifted my head past the curtain next to my bed to see if it was still dark outside, and it was. I remember seeing our garden as well as the neighboring house on the other side of our fence, but then I noticed something else over the roof of that particular neighbor's house. Slowly gliding through the air was what I can only describe as a roughly saucer-shaped object. In the past, I've described this using the word saucer, even though it isn't exactly accurate. It was too dark to see any color it might have had, so to me it was just dark, but I know I heard a light humming sound as it moved over the houses. It couldn't have been any bigger than a car or a small van, and the speed at which it was moving was slower, but still fast enough to where I was only able to follow it for 30 to 40 seconds before it was gone. Being young and not knowing if what I had seen was real or a dream, I literally slapped myself in the face. I was definitely awake and in disbelief. When it had gone beyond my line of sight, you would think I'd get out of bed and wake up my parents, or at least go to another window having witnessed something so extraordinary. Surprisingly, though, the only thing I did was lay back down and fall asleep, which is so unlike me. The very next day, with the event still fresh in my mind, I found my mom putting laundry away in her bedroom. Feeling comfortable enough to tell her almost anything, even which girls I fancied at school, I told her exactly what I had seen. Like any parent might do while hearing a fictitious-sounding story from your child, she didn't act genuinely surprised. She only responded with quick lines like, "Oh wow, and that sounds amazing." I asked her if she believed me and she said yes, but even at that age I knew she didn't. During the summer of that same year, a group of friends and I would venture to the edge of our neighborhood almost every day. We had found a field with a small adjoining wooded area, and very quickly it became our den where we spent hours climbing trees and playing tag or hide and seek. At the very end of our den was a 4-foot-wide creek separating the field we played in from the town's rugby club, and one evening we made our way back to that creek and crossed it to get behind the grounds of the club. These grounds consisted of 2 large fields and a smaller patch of grass along the side, which is where we were. I'm not sure why we chose to go there that night, but we caught sight of something in the sky that appeared to be flying in our direction. At first, I know we all thought it was a Royal Air Force plane, as they would occasionally pass over our town. The closer it got, however, the more it looked like something none of us had ever seen before. Trying to explain this is difficult because it would look like one shape, then as we watched, it would almost change or morph mid-air and look like something else. It even took on a shape that looked horizontal from our view, like it should be flying across the sky and not toward us. It was also extremely low, and as it came directly over our heads, one of the guys shouted, "It's a UFO." That sent all of us into a panic. Before I could even think about anything else, my friends were running back toward the creek, and they were running for their lives. I didn't move, and the only one who stayed with me was my friend George. I wanted to run, and I'm sure he did too, but we must have been in such disbelief that we stayed there like statues. George and I both saw this thing changing shape in real time as it flew by. It looked so different from every angle that there's no real way to describe it. It was like an actual transformer, except none of the shapes resembled anything. I think it got to be too much for us to see, and I don't remember who went first, but George and I turned back toward the creek and finally started running. I knew it would be passing us at any second, and I remember looking up to see where it was. I completely expected to see it still changing shape in the sky, but instead, a low-flying military jet flew over and it was banked into a slight turn and going away from us. I don't understand any part of this because the jet we saw was ordinary in every way. It was so ordinary, in fact, that George and I stopped running to watch until we couldn't see it anymore. We were both speechless because in what seemed like a fraction of a second, it went from an unrecognizable shape-shifting thing in the air to a normal common military jet. My memory of what happened right afterward is a little hazy, but when we made it back to our friends, we discussed what had happened, and every one of us thought it was some kind of spacecraft. George and I were the only ones to witness it changing into a jet, though. I've had a lot of years to think about this, and I've told many people the story. One common response I get is that it was a jet the whole time and it just looks strange to us on the ground because of angles or light or some other illusion. Here are a few reasons I know that's not the case. Number one, if it really was an RAF jet, it was flying dangerously low. What we saw was only 100 to 150 feet above us. It almost felt like you could reach out and touch it. I can't imagine a jet being that low unless it was landing or crashing. Number two, we have eyes and we all saw the same thing. Not a single one of us has ever seen anything like it. And number three, which is perhaps the most obvious reason, military jets are ear-piercingly loud. No one remembers hearing anything at all, let alone the screaming engine of a jet. From what I've read, RAF jets can rupture eardrums at close distances, yet George and I were perfectly fine. Several years ago, after posting my story to a local online group, someone commented and advised me to share it with a specific investigator who particularly focused on UFO activity in the Yorkshire area. I followed through on this and we ended up having a conversation over the phone. After listening to every detail I could remember, he simply said that was not a military aircraft. I know that's not proof of anything, but it helped me to confirm what I already thought. If you were to ask me, do you believe aliens are actually visiting us, I would tell you with complete confidence that I do. The existence of extraterrestrials has never seemed irrational to me, and I even get upset when I hear people say it's all made up or in our heads. The amount of arrogance it must take to think we are the only ones around is unbelievable to me. When I was about 13 years old, my parents took my two younger siblings and me to my Aunt Jill's house for the weekend while they were out of town. She lived way out in rural West Santa Barbara with her husband Robert and their overly energetic golden retriever Molly. I was never a fan of sleepovers or staying the night in strange places, so I didn't want to be there. Plus, I had terrible anxiety as a kid, and being away from my parents only made it worse. I remember getting dropped off and feeling angry at them for leaving me with my aunt, who was a very loud, in-your-face person. By today's standards, she would probably be referred to as a Karen. Her gun-obsessed husband Robert wasn't much easier to be around either, since the only thing he talked about was hunting or politics. The entire weekend felt doomed before it had even started, and sure enough, the first day dragged on exactly like I expected. My aunt took us into town for hours to run errands with her, and for lunch we ate leftovers that had probably been in the fridge too long while Robert talked endlessly about things way over our heads. Robert was a cook at a dinner restaurant, so he left for work right after lunch, and I remember my aunt saying he would usually get home around 1 o'clock in the morning. That night she put on The Sandlot for us, then went to bed. My younger brother and sister fell asleep before the movie ended, but I couldn't sleep, and when it was over, I just kind of laid there listening to the weird and different sounds of their house. I started to get anxious about being there, so I decided to go out on their back deck, and I took Molly with me. Animals were always a huge comfort for me when my anxiety got bad, and I just needed to get away from the stillness inside for a little while. Unfortunately, when I got outside, it was almost worse. I grew up on the east side where we could always see or hear something at night. I couldn't hear a single car driving by, and they didn't even have a porch light, so it was incredibly dark. It felt like I was in a different world and it made me uneasy. I sat on the steps that went out to their yard with Molly beside me, and after a couple of minutes I noticed something was wrong with her. She started trembling like dogs do when they're scared or cold after a bath. She wasn't whining, she was just shaking, and it got really intense. I remember asking her if she was okay while I pet her face, and I thought she had seen another animal. Then she locked onto something and was staring hard at a single point in the darkness. Her tail went down straight against her back legs and her body got stiff. That made my anxiety shoot up too, and it gave me the sense there was something else there with us. Then a sound seemed to come out of nowhere. It was almost too low to recognize, but I could tell it was pulsing in a rhythm. It didn't sound like machinery or equipment, but it also wasn't natural either. It was a heavy thumping that I could feel through the steps. The only thing I wanted to do was get back inside, so I stood up and grabbed Molly's collar. I felt my fingers wrap underneath the webbing of her collar, and I even heard her metal tag when I pulled on it. At that same second, and almost like things were moving in slow motion, my stomach dropped and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. My whole body tensed up like I had been hit with a taser. That pulsing sound was getting louder too, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I honestly thought I was going to die. Then, like it popped into reality from a separate dimension, a dark blue glow appeared above the back of their property. It's weird to say this, but it almost looked fake, like it was painted there. It was lightly pulsing in sync with that horrible sound, and it felt like it was vibrating the actual air around Molly and me. I still couldn't look away from it though, and I was completely frozen. I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't scream, and I couldn't even let go of Molly's collar. It was like an invisible force had me pinned there, and every muscle in my body was cramping in a very painful way. There was also a heavy pressure in the air that affected my ears. The bottom part of this blue light got brighter, and it lit both me and Molly like we were in a spotlight. I don't think it lasted more than about 10 seconds, but they were the longest seconds of my life. I was in a total state of panic, but I was aware enough to notice one thing. While the light was on us, my breathing stopped. I didn't take a single breath, and I consciously knew that was happening. I could still see the longer grass underneath this thing, and it was standing straight up from the roots like something was trying to rip it out of the ground. When the pressure became almost too much to take, everything stopped. My body went limp and I collapsed onto the deck, but I was still able to see the blue light fade away, and it looked like smoke dissipating in the air. It took me a minute to realize it, but the sound and the pressure were both gone too. Molly was sitting down with her head up, and I was just lying there with no clue what had happened. Another disturbing part about this is that for some reason I expected my aunt to come running out to help me, but no one came outside and no one even noticed. It felt impossible to me that something that unbelievable could happen while everyone else kept sleeping. That still bothers me. I did get up and make it back into the house, then woke my aunt up. I told her everything, and then went over it a second time later that night when Robert got home from work. I don't think I was old enough then to know if they believed me or not, but they definitely knew I had gone through something, and they were both pretty supportive. Another thing I can't explain is that I never told my parents about it. I'm almost positive my aunt told my mom at some point, but she never said a word to me about it. I don't know why this happened. I just know that the only two people I ever talked to were my aunt and Robert. For months afterward, I was in a constant state of fear, thinking it would happen again, especially at night. I would replay everything in my head over and over, and I just wanted it to go away. Thankfully, it did fade over time, and I think I had come back down to my normal self later that year. It was an extremely traumatic event, though. Even today, I don't know what I saw or what happened to me. I can only guess that somehow I encountered a kind of extraterrestrial being or interdimensional entity, or maybe it was something entirely different. For all I know, I could have had a stroke right there on their deck and lived through it, and everything I saw was in my head. Basically, what I'm saying is that I've been at a total loss since it happened, but whatever it was, I couldn't possibly ever forget it.